world of A Song of Ice and Fire, characters taking on new identities, either temporarily or permanently, is actually surprisingly common. Examples include, but are not limited to, Arya Stark becomes Arry whilst travelling north with Yoren, pretending to be a Night's Watch recruit. Sansa Stark is presented to the Vale as Elaine Stone, Littlefinger's bastard daughter. Tyrion Lannister assumes the alias of Yolo whilst travelling through Essos after fleeing King's Landing. Jane Poole, Sansa's childhood friend at Winterfell, is married to Ramsay Bolton as a fake Arya Stark. Mance Rayder takes up the identity of Rattleshirt after Rattleshirt is burned alive by Stannis as a fake Mance Rayder. And finally, Sir Barristan Selmy first introduces himself to Daenerys Targaryen as Arstan Whitebeard, a simple squire. There are also characters with hidden identities unbeknownst to them through their parentage, such as Jon Snow or Cersei Lannister's supposedly Baratheon children. We can also look at the characters believed to be deceased, but in reality are very much alive, such as Brandon Rickon Stark or Sir Davos Seaworth. So after highlighting all these examples, I personally feel it would be strange, and indeed unlikely, if there were not more characters in the story with hidden identities yet to be revealed. Also, I think it's important to remember that the book chapters are written in the first person point of view of some of the characters, so if the characters we hear from don't know a secret, we would not be privy either. So, in this two-part video series, I'm going to highlight a character I believe to be suspicious. And to begin that exploration, we're going to have to start at the Tower of Joy. So let's go over what we actually know about the events that happened at the Tower of Joy. Eddard Stark, along with 6 Northmen, including Howland Reed, arrived to be confronted by 3 of Aerys Targaryen's Kingsguard, Sir Arthur Dayne, Sir Gerald Hightower, and Sir Oswell Went. They briefly discuss events at the Trident, King Aerys' death, and the recent surrender of Lords Tyrell and Redwyne. They then begin to fight. After the skirmish, only Ned and Howland have survived the combat. They then climb the tower up to Lyanna and... Wait, hold up, go back, rewind. Are we sure that they're the only 2 that survived? In the show that's what's depicted, but as we know, the TV series is just a short adaptation of the source material, the books. It removes, modifies, or even sometimes combines storylines. So let's look at what the books can tell us. Firstly, we can go to a story Brandon Stark recounts being told by his father about Sir Arthur and the Tower. They called him the Sword of the Morning, and he would have killed me, but for Howland Reed. Now does that mean that Howland killed Sir Arthur, like as in the show? Or couldn't it just as easily mean that he used words and reason to halt the fighting instead of steal? I mean, if we look at it logically, why were they even fighting in the first place? Ned is no threat. He wouldn't harm a family member. So why block his path? Why fight? Unless they weren't guarding Lyanna and the baby's physical well-being at that very moment, so much as they were protecting the secret of the child's very existence. Remember, in their initial conversation, it's established that the Kingsguard know King Aerys is dead. They know Prince Rhaegar is dead. They know pretty much the whole of Westeros has pledged their allegiance to King Robert. And if they got a full report of the events at King's Landing, then they know the new monarch and his allies aren't beyond infanticide. So, realistically, with no Targaryen loyalists left, their new prince's best hope for survival is number 1, secrecy, and number 2, that they can get the child in the safe custody of the only person left in the land who would have unconditional, blood-deep loyalty and power to protect him, the boy's uncle, Eddard Stark. And wow, look who just happened to turn up. So to go back to the initial question, why were they even fighting in the first place? I believe it was purely to kill Ned's accompanying men, because the more people who know a secret, the less secure it is. Hurting Ned was never an option because they needed him. Now, one of the major quotes in the story that leads people into thinking that all the Kingsguard died that day was Ned saying, They had been 7 against 3, yet only 2 had lived to ride away, Eddard Stark himself and the little Crannogman. But that's actually written somewhat ambiguously. They had been 7 against 3, yet only 2 had lived to ride away. They could mean of the 10 men fighting that day, only 2 had lived, or they could just as easily only be referring to his band of 7 Northmen, as it's written from Ned's perspective. And now, my friends, we come to the smoking gun of this theory, and that's what Ned did with the bodies of the men who were supposed to have died that day. Ned had pulled down the tower afterwards, and used its bloody stones to build 8 cairns upon the ridge. So he buried the bodies. Now to us, on the face of it, that might sound fine, but in the reality of the world he lives in, it's absolutely not fine. In Westeros, it's traditional to return the bodies of highborn lords and ladies to their respective families so that they can be at rest with their kin. And we hear throughout the story how important this is, including, sadly, with Ned's bones himself. Now, despite not returning any bones, Ned does return Lord William Dustin's horse to Lady Dustin and Sir Arthur Dayne's sword to Starfall. So we know for sure he went to the effort of visiting at least 2 of the families and returning things, but no bones. But one body was returned, and that was his sister's, Lyanna Stark. Now, doesn't that strike you as a massive insult to the other families involved? He brings back his sister's bones, but none of the loyal Northern lords who gave their lives trying to save her? It all just seems so out of character for Ned. There has to be a reason. And there's only really one that makes sense. And that is, of the 8 men who are supposed to have died that day, at least 1 lived. And I believe that man was Sir Arthur Dayne. And this is what explains Ned's use of the cairns. He couldn't return 7 bodies and leave out the 8th family. It was either return all the bones or none. Now I know what you're thinking. If Sir Arthur Dayne survived, where is he? Well, given his likely involvement in the abduction of Lyanna, which Robert would have demanded his head for, I think the only option Ned would have made available to him was taking the black and becoming a brother of the Night's Watch, which he would have needed to have done so under a new identity to avoid King Robert's wrath. So that's it for part 1. In part 2, we're going to discuss who Sir Arthur Dayne was and who I feel he may have gone on to become. If you have any questions, comments or corrections, please leave those below. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.